There's a love of craft behind everything I do, I'd say, which has been in me since childhood. My work is the result of a lot of understanding and the experience you get through working, making, being in the material, mixing, trying out, tacit knowledge, you know.
Bergen, probably my favorite Norwegian city. There always seems to be a crackle of creativity in the air here. And we've come to visit the studio of a very creative and successful textile artist whose work cleverly blends digital technology with meticulous craftsmanship to make quiet, calming and quite mesmerizing artworks.
Well, this is a heavy canvas, cotton canvas. In my processes, I'm really quite, big brushes, I scrape things down, layers on top of each other. I check out things, how will this color come through when I have layers of things. And these are two-sided, as you can see.
Oh gosh, yes.
So
the material is prepared and painted and scraped and
yes,
all
yes,
that
yeah.
before
yeah.
this process of making
Exactly.
the lace work, I guess we could
Yes,
call it.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could call it lace work.
Yeah.
Made with modern tools. And but all the samples, that's why I put all these things on the table. This is pre-cutting, you know.
Beautiful color.
It's like a thin skin.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And this is I paint silk. I try out. These are four different research pieces, you might say.
Or tests.
Tests, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Take tests. And then I choose the best one and I continue. I lose control and I try to take it back, you see. And here as well, I work with colors that flow over the piece, and then I add more color. I wait till it's dry and I try to make these migration lines. Is that a...
Migration. No, I love the way you describe it. The color is absolutely gorgeous color. Really.
And that's why I use a lot of silk. It's not a high quality silk, I wouldn't say that, but it's still a silk.
Right.
Because, you know, color is a reflection of light. And the silk reflects the light very well. The silk itself is, as you see here, very, very thin. Mm-hmm. It would never work for the large scale work I do. So I laminate them with this canvas.
Right.
Or this one is with that canvas. And it's still quite soft, it's still quite shiny, but now it can carry the lace. Now it can be cut into, otherwise it would just flop.
Yeah, no, I get that totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is, and that's a kind of, it's a process that I developed through sampling, through trying out, experimenting, and having this tacit knowledge, this feeling in my hands that it's not something I sit and think about, it will work like that. You have to try it, you have to be in the material and work. Working with these, like the dentelle d'Alençon, when I sit, draw and plan it, I also feel related to the people who were sitting there making them.
I'm going to stop you right there. Just hold on, because we must talk about dentelle d'Alençon, because not everybody will know what we're talking about. Dentelle d'Alençon is lace from Alençon in France. So tell me, why is it famous?
Alençon was famous because they developed a technique, a lace technique, that became the high-end fashion for centuries.
So it's beautiful lace.
Beautiful and very detailed and very advanced. And the women were famous for working. I think also nuns were working in this field.
Right.
At least the female business. And then with the Industrial Revolution, the thing kind of disappeared. But they have a beautiful museum in Alençon that some friends brought me to, where I was amazed by the whole story, by the fabrics themselves, and the female side of it. Mm. And then I could return to paintings to see how important they were in the clothes of the 16th century.
Ingrid's multi-layered cutouts are mounted and displayed in a way that compels you to go close, to move around and examine them from different vantage points.
I call this a deep lace.
And the motives, these shapes that you make, where are they? I mean, it's a sort of, this is like a cross, and this is almost like a snowflake.
Yeah. This is very typical for Norwegian netters and sweaters. Mm-hmm. It's called åttebladsrosen, not sure of the English word. A rose, they call it a rose with 8 leaves. On the other side, I went into Arabic geometry.
Okay, yeah.
And then I tried to make a metamorphosis between the Norwegian patterns, and then they gradually become Arabic ornaments. When you move around it, the view of it changes because of this, the depth. This is only a detail, of course, but it's like 4 meters long. So that's also why I like to go large scale, that you kind of have a physical experience. It's like filling your view. It takes your horizon when you can go up to 4 meters.
Ingrid, could you tell me a little bit about the work that you have on the Viking ship?
Yeah, these are what I call the gradations made in dakran, which showed out to be a very interesting material for me to work in the laser cutter, because it's so stable. It's stabilized polyester, and the laser it suits very well each other. The laser can do very, very fine details for me, and then I laminate them. So there's like 20, 30 layers of this fine material on top of each other, and so I can build with them. But it was hard to go large scale in this way of working.
Because you mentioned a laser cutter, which is how this is made. Yeah. But before laser cutters were as good as they are today, you did this by hand.
Well, I had started cutting by hand, folding and cutting. I think very many people has done as a child,
Yeah.
And then you fold, you cut a piece, and you open up, and something nice happens.
Right.
And I started to work like that, and putting layers on top of each other and sewing them together. But then I went to a conference in London where I came across the laser cutter, and I found out that in that way I could work more organic, I can have other details, and I found out I could go large scale with it.
Yeah, your work can be much bigger,
yes.
Like this sort of size.
Yes.
But because the laser cutter has to have a template to work from.
Yes.
So you would draw this on the canvas this big? No,
I start by drawing by hand. I go through a couple of computer programs, and the last program is very good for upscaling and also for communicating with the guys who cut it for me.
What is the future of this piece? Is it going somewhere? It's
been exhibited a couple of times, and the sister, I very often make two things. All the files, I can put them in another color, and I made this same motive in a piece that is now, it was bought by the Norwegian Foreign Ministry, so it's in Kuala Lumpur.
Where I've been, that's nice.
In an embassy there, in the Norwegian embassy in Kuala Lumpur,
oh,
in another color. Yeah, this piece has a color on the back, so you can, if you look, when I mount my work, I take into consideration, or try to, the light of the room, and sometimes I put on lights, in between, so that the color comes shining through when you experience the piece from the front. It's deliberate, I'd say. Yeah.
Well, I think your work is just beautiful. Do you feel with your work that there's a trajectory? You could just presumably you're very successful. You could just keep doing this and probably still be very successful. But at the same time, what you want is to have a kind of arc.
Yes.
A narrative arc to the work.
When I look back, I have been changing my ideas and my means and how I work during the years. So I have a long career now, and I want to do other things now. I always try to surprise myself in the next exhibition. Maybe not totally radically, but that there is another challenge for me inside the process. And because it wouldn't be very interesting to kind of repeat and do the same thing again. A lot of people think, how so fun, how it's just like a joy to be an artist. But it's not, you know.
It's absolutely not, and it takes a huge amount of self-belief, I think.
Yeah, you have some existential questions all the time, you know, why am I doing it? Am I good at it? Does this communicate? How important is it? These kind of questions are I think, very normal for an artist, and they're quite heavy questions.
Well, Ingrid seems to have found answers to some of those heavy questions, though of all the artists we visited for this series, I must admit I found Ingrid's work the hardest to put into words. But they're certainly captivating, the way they play with light, shadow and perspective, at once both delicate and forceful, with a strange capacity to embrace you, asking you to join them in their intricate, patterned universe.